Hello. So we're just continuing on with the advanced object-oriented programming chapter, and we're just going through some composition files over here. So we'll do file 3 and 3p. So composition is really similar to the aggregation we've already done. The main difference is just that instead of making two independent objects of different classes, when you make an object of one class, inside of it you're making an object of a different class. So that just means that the inside object can't exist independent from the outside object. So let's just do an example of that. I think it's easier to get if you just see it actually written out in code. So let's see, what do we have here? Okay, so we're going to make a library card class and a library member class. Let me actually just start writing this here. And I actually give you some starter code here, because in this library card class, you're going to see that we're going to have an expiration date. So let me start making the library card class, and then we'll import that as it becomes relevant. So let's just start off with our constructor. Let's say init. We're going to have self. And if we do just make these random, you could pass them in. I'm just going to hard code them though as random numbers. Let's just do this. That gets the point across easy enough. So let's do self card number, and we're just going to make this a random number. So I'm just going to import random. Again, you'd probably want to implement some logic in the real world that makes sure you don't have clashing numbers, even if it's pretty unlikely. Let's do rand range. Let's say we want our ID number to be anywhere from 1 and 100,000, right? So we could do that. Then we can say, hey, we want a valid until. So this is like an expiration date. So let's make this equal to, and this is actually where we want date times. So let's do from date time import. Let's just do date so we don't get the date attached to it. Let's also get a time delta. So let's say we want the valid until to be equal to date dot today plus a time delta of days equals 365. So we're going to say, hey, we want it to be valid for an entire year, essentially. So whatever today is, go forward a year. Okay. And we're going to have this class, but we're not actually going to make any objects of this type of class yet. We're going to first make our library member class. Okay. So library member class should have a member's name and a library card object. When a library member object is instantiated, it should automatically create a library card object within it, demonstrating the principle of composition. Make a library member object and try and print out their library card ID. Okay, so let's make the class for library member. Say library member. Do def. Oops, let's not misspell it. Init. And let's pass in a name. Just say self.name equals name. Then self.library card is going to equal a library card object, and we're just going to create it here. So I'm going to make a library member, and I'm going to step inside the constructor so we can actually see what's going on inside of here. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's say Tim is going to be our library member that we're going to create. Okay. And eventually I want to print out Tim's library card number. Okay. So let's set a breakpoint, step through this. Okay, so I'm going to step inside of here, which is going to call the which calls the initializer over here. So we're going to assign a variable, and this is variable of name with the value of Tim inside of our object. And then we want to store a library card object inside of here. So to do that, just like when we made a library member object by calling the class name here, we're going to make a library card object by calling it the constructor here, right? So I'm going to step into this, and you'll notice we jump into the init function here, and we're going to create a library card object right here with a random card number as well as a valid until date. And that just got stored inside of here, which is stored inside of library member, which now we stored inside of Tim. Okay. So Tim has a library card, which is an entire library card object. And we have a card number as well as the date that it's valid until. So we can say, oh, it's valid until 2026 on March 8th, because you can see it's March 8th right now. So valid until a year from now. So I could print out the card number there. And the key point here is that I can access this card number through Tim, but it only exists within the scope of Tim, of this library member object. I can't do anything like library card dot card number, because this doesn't exist even. I only have a library card object stored inside of Tim. So the only way to get to this specific library card object is through Tim, right? So because that would, you can see the squiggly lines, it's not defined. It's going to cause me an error. So that's the entire idea of composition. This other object only exists through, I can only access it through the other object, essentially. So let's see, we can do a card validity check. It expires. Okay, cool. So let's try doing a check on the, what did I say to do? Call this. Let's just make up a name. Validity check, maybe. Validity check. We're just gonna pass himself. Okay. And we want to check whether this library member's library card is still valid. So we have self, which is the library member, because it's part of this library member class. They have a library card instance variable, so we're going to do library card. And that in turn has a valid until date time. Okay, so we want to check if this is greater than or equal to. Let's just do date dot today. So we want to see if it's still valid. So if it is, let's just print out a message, or we could return it. I'm just going to print it. Let's say your library card is still valid. It's valid until let's just print this out. You could do a string format of the date time, but that should be fine if we just print it like that for our purposes here. So it's as long as it is either today or the date is past, then it's still going to be valid. Otherwise, we can assume that it's expired. So let me just copy something like this and say your library card expired on this date. Okay. So let's try running this method right here. Cool. Your library card is still valid. It's valid until 2026, so a year from now. Okay. Okay. So hopefully that gives you a good idea on how you can access objects created inside of other objects. So for example, in this method, I need to access the valid until variable, which is stored in library card. And since my library card is created inside of the library member here, when I use a method that's part of that's a library member method, I need to access it through self, access that instance variable it's storing my object, and then inside of that, I can get access to the library card instance variables. So we have that. Let's do another quick practice. So 03p. Let's come over to here. And let's see what we got. So your task is to model a simple relationship between animals and their heartbeats. Okay, so we're not going to do too many things on this one, actually. We're just going to have a heart class that just has a beats per minute, and it just says thump thump if you call a method that's named beat. And then we're going to make an animal class that has a heart object created within it. Okay. So let's just start typing this out. Let's say we have class of heart. Let's create. No, not that. And let's do self and self dot. What is it? Beats per minute. Let's say beats per minute equals 70. Let's do a method def beat self. And let's just return a string. So beat, and I don't think the instruction is set to include the beats per minute, but let's just include that just for fun. Okay, so let's say we have our class of heart, and then we want our class of animal. And these have a parameter for species, and so we have self, and then species, okay. So self.species, and then self.heart is equal to a heart object, okay. Cool. No other methods needed for animal. Okay, so let's instantiate an animal object, and then print the species name, beats per minute, and I'll do the beat method. So let's just create a dog. So dog is an animal with a species of dog. Okay, so dog, we can print out the species name just like normal. It's a regular old instance variable that we've seen lots of times at this point, but dog also has a heart, which is an object which can beat. And beat returns this string, so that's fine that we're printing it out. So we can run that. In fact, let's step through it. Let's make sure we step through. Show exactly what's going on. So we're creating an animal object, okay? We're giving it a species. Let's do self.species equals species. We need to actually type it out correctly. So let's step into there. Species is dog, so that's what our animal is going to be. And then its heart instance variable is going to be equal to a heart object, which is just going to have a default value of 70 for its BPM. So this dog can run the beat method through its heart. So beat at 70 BPM. Cool. So again, the key point, heart is a separate kind of object. It is stored inside of dog, and we only have access to it through dog. In contrast to when we did aggregation, where we could have like a heart and an animal object separately, and after they're independently created, we stick one inside the other. That's the key difference between the two. So hopefully that helps you understand what's going on there. And then we'll stop this video here, and we'll jump back into inheritance in the following files.